It was windy and near sunset, and the water was a sloppy white bronze. I know what that looks like. Okay. The sunlight bouncing all over it. The waves were big for the Mediterranean. Swift breakers that rose up, all riven with wind chop, to crash into quick, uneven lines, allowing him to ride them for a moment. Then it was under in a tumble of bubbles and sand, and back up into a burst of gold light and the taste of salt in everything. His eyes stinging voluptuously. Big black pelicans rode air cushions just over the swells, soared soared into steep and clumsy turns, stalled, dropped into the water around him. They half folded their wings when they dove, making adjustments with them until the actual moment of the awkward crash into the water. Often they came up gulping small fish. Just meters from him, one splashed in, silhouetted against the sun like a stuka or a pterodactyl. Cool and warm, immersed in salt, he bobbed on the swell and blinked, blinded by salt light. A breaking wave looked like diamonds, smashed to cream. His phone rang. His phone rang. It was Ursula and Phyllis, to tell him that Maya was having another fit and was inconsolable. He got up, put on unders, and went to the bathroom. Waves leaped over a line of backwash. Maya, depressed again. Last time he had seen her, she had been in high spirits, almost euphoric. And that was what, a week ago? But that was Maya. Maya was crazy. Crazy in a Russian way, however, which meant she was a power to be reckoned with. Mother Russia. The church and the communists both had tried to eradicate the matriarchy that had preceded them, and all they had achieved was a flood of bitter, emasculating scorn. A whole nation full of contemptuous Rusalkas and Baba Yagas and 20-hour-a-day superwomen, living in a nearly pathogenic culture of mothers, daughters, babushkas, granddaughters, yet still necessarily absorbed in their relationships with men, desperately trying to find the lost father, the perfect mate, or just a man who would pull his share of the load. Finding that great love, and then, often than not, destroying it. Crazy. Well, it was dangerous to generalize. But Maya was a classic case. Moody, angry, flirtatious, brilliant, charming, manipulative, intense. And now filling his office like a huge slab of dejection, her eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot, her mouth haggard. Ursula and Phyllis nodded and whispered thanks to Michelle for getting up so early and left. He went to the Venetian blinds and opened them, and the light from the central dome poured in. He saw again that Maya was a beautiful woman, with wild, lustrous hair and a dark, charismatic gaze, immediate and direct. It was dismaying to see her this upset. He never got used to it. It contrasted too sharply with her usual vivaciousness. The way she would put a finger to your arm as she rattled on in a confiding tone about one fascinating thing or another. All strangely mimicked by this desperate creature, who leaned forward onto his desk and began to tell him in a ragged, hoarse voice about the latest scene in the unfolding drama of her and John, and then, again, Frank. Apparently, she had gotten angry at John for refusing to help her in a plan she had to get some of the Russian-based multinationals to underwrite the development of settlements in Hellas Basin, which, being the deepest point on Mars, was going to be first to benefit. Which being the deepest point on Mars was going to be the first to benefit from the atmospheric changes that they were beginning to see. The air pressure at low point, 4 kilometers below the datum, was always going to be 10 times thicker than that on top of the great volcanoes, and 3 times thicker than that at the datum. It was going to be the first human viable place, perfect for development. But apparently, John preferred to work through UNOMA and governments. And this was just one of the many basic political disagreements which were beginning to infect their personal life. And this was just one of the many basic political disagreements which were beginning to infect their personal life, to the point that they were fighting pretty regularly about other things, things that didn't matter, things about which they had never fought before. Watching her, Michelle almost said, "John wants you irritated with him." He wasn't sure what John would say to that. Maya rubbed her eyes, leaned her forehead on his desk, revealing the back of her neck and her broad, rangy shoulders. She would never look this distraught in front of most of Underhill. It was an intimacy between them, something she only did with him. It was as if she had taken off her clothes. People didn't understand that true intimacy does not consist of sexual intercourse. People didn't understand that true intimacy did not consist of sexual intercourse, which could be done with strangers and in a state of total alienation. Intimacy consisted of talking for hours about what was most important in one's life. Although it was true she would be beautiful naked, she had perfect proportions. He recalled the way she looked swimming in the pool, doing the backstroke in a blue bathing suit cut high over the hip bones. A Mediterranean image. He was floating in the water at Villefranche, everything flooded with the sunset's amber light, and he was looking in at the beach where men and women were walking, naked except for neon triangles of cachet sexe bathing suits. brown-skinned, bare-breasted women walking in pairs like dancers in the sunlight. Then dolphins sliced out of the water between him and the beach, their sleek black bodies rounded like the women's. I am so glad Purple Wayne spoke up about the edit, because this is blindsiding me. Ooh la la. He's like Pepe Le Pew. Oh no. Sorry, I don't want to, interpret it. He's a romantic, I definitely think my opinion has already been influenced. He's Pepe Le Pew. Holy shit. Did you knit that yourself? Yes, except it's called crochet. I crocheted it myself. Thank you for 51 months. Yeah. Hot topless Euro chicks in local rum. Dude, except Michelle's like thinking that as he looks at a woman crying on his desk. He's like, wow, we're really good friends. I'm thinking of topless chicks and rum. How about you, baby? Okay. She's like, you're my therapist. Things are fine. It is now a love square. But now Maya was talking about Frank. Frank, who had been a sixth sense for trouble between John and Maya. 6 would not be necessary. And who came running to Maya every time he felt the signs. To walk with her, to talk about his vision of Mars, which was progressive, exciting, ambitious, everything that John's was not. Frank is so much more dynamic than John these days. I don't know why. Because he agrees with you, Michelle said. Or because he agrees with you. Maya shrugged. Perhaps that's all I mean. But we have a chance to build a whole civilization here. We do. But John is so... Big sigh. And yet I love him. I really do. But... She talked for a while about their past. How their courtship had saved the voyage out from anarchy, or at least ennui. How John's easygoing stability had been so good for her. How you could count on him. How impressed she had been by his fame. How she had felt that the liaison had made her part of world history forever. But now she understood that she herself was going to be a part of world history anyway. All of them in the first 100 were. Her voice rose, became faster and more vehement. I don't need John for that now. I only need him for how I feel about him. But now we don't agree on anything, and we're not very much alike. And Frank, who has been so careful to hold back no matter what. We agree about almost everything. And I've been so enthusiastic about that part that I've given him the wrong signal again. So he did it again. Yesterday in the pool, he held me, took my arms in his hands. She crossed her arms and clasped her biceps in her hands and asked me to leave John for him, which I would never do, and he was shaking. And I said I couldn't, but I was shaking too. So later, she had been on edge and had started a fight with John. Started it so flagrantly that he had gotten truly angry and had left and taken a rover out to Nadia's arcade and spent the night there with the construction team. And Frank had come to talk to her again. And when she had just barely put him off, Frank had declared that he was going to live with the European settlement on the other side of the planet. He who was the colony's driving force. He who was the colony's driving force. And he'll really do it. He's not one to threaten. He's been learning German the way he does. Languages are nothing to Frank. Or he's been learning German the way that he does. Languages are nothing to Frank. Michelle tried to concentrate on what she was saying. It was difficult because he knew full well that in a week everything would be different. All the dynamics in that little trio altered beyond recognition. So it was hard to care. What about his troubles? Yeah. What about his troubles? They went much, much deeper. But no one ever listened to him. He walked back and forth in front of the window, reassuring her with the usual questions and comments. No, I'm serious. You can't send a therapist. You can't send just one. Such a stupid mistake. It's actually breaking my immersion. Okay, anyways, they sent one therapist. Let's continue. His problems, they went much, much deeper, but no one ever listened to him. He walked back and forth in front of the window, reassuring her with the usual comments and questions. The greenery in the atrium was refreshing. It's good to see you, Faye, and welcome. The greenery in the atrium was refreshing. It could have been a courtyard in the Arles or Villefranche. Or suddenly it reminded him of Avignon's narrow cypress-arched plaza near the Pope's Palace. The plaza and its cafe tables, which in the summer, just after sunset, had the color of Mars. Taste of olive and red wine. Thank you, Max Threat. And hello, Faye. And welcome, everybody. We are colonizing Mars. Taste of olive and red wine. Let's go for a walk, he said, Standard part of therapy hour. They crossed the atrium and went into the kitchens so that Michel could eat a breakfast which he forgot even as he swallowed. We should call eating forgetting, he thought, as they walked around the hall to the locks. They put on suits. Maya entering a change room to get her unders on. Then checked them and went in the lock and depressurized it, and then opened the big outer door and stepped outside. The diamond chill. For a while they stayed on the sidewalks circling Underhill, taking a tour of the dump and its great salt pyramids. Do you think they'll ever find a use for all this salt? He said. Sachs is still working on it. From time to time, Maya went on talking about John and Frank. Michel asked the questions that a shrink program would have asked. Maya answered in the way a Maya program would have answered. Their voices right in each other's ears. The intimacy of the intercom. They came to the lichen farm, and Michel stopped to gaze over the trays, to soak in their intense living color. Salt pyramids, it's waste salt. Do you think they'll ever find a use for all this salt? Which are stacked in pyramids for some reason. Salt pyramids in the dump. You know how they are. Exactly. I just closed the book and opened it to the right page. Michel asked the questions that a shrink program would have asked, and Maya answered in the way a Maya program would have answered. Their voices right in each other's ears, the intimacy of the intercom. Oh, I went back too far. Michel stopped to gaze over the trays, to soak in their intense living color. Black snow algae, and then thick mats of Odu lichen. Odu, I don't know, O2 lichen, in which the algae symbiote was a blue-green strain that Vlad had just gotten to grow alone. Red lichen, which seemed to not be doing well. Superfluous, in any case. Yellow lichen, olive lichen, a lichen that looked exactly like battleship paint, flaky white and green lichen, living green. It pulsed in the eye, a rich and improbable desert flower. He had heard Hiroko, looking down at such a growth, say, "This is viriditas," which was Latin for greening power. The word had been coined by a Christian mystic of the Middle Ages, a woman named Hildegard. Viriditas, now adapting to conditions here and spreading slowly over the lowlands of the northern hemisphere. In the southern summers, it did even better. One day, it had reached 285 Kelvin. 285 Kelvin. A record high by 12 degrees. The world was changing. Maya remarked as they walked by the flats. Yes, Michel said, and could not help adding, only 300 years before we reach livable temperatures. Maya laughed. She was feeling better. Soon she would be back on a level, or at least crossing through that zone on the way to Euphoria. Maya was labile. Maya was labile. Stability, lability was the most recent characteristic Michel had been studying in the first 100. Maya represented the labile extreme. Okay, how do I say that? Labile? Stable or label? Labial? Liable? No, not liable. It's labile. It's like abile with L. Labile? That seems comfortable. Yeah, lab. Labile. Labile. I already forgot my preference. Labile. Labile. Okay. Maya was labile. Stability, lability. Or stability, lability was the most recent characteristic Michel had been studying in the first 100. Maya represented the labile extreme. Labile or stabile? Whatever, we've figured it out. Thanks. Maya represented the labile extreme. Let's drive out and see the arcade, she said. Michel agreed, wondering what might happen if they ran into John. They went to the parking lot and checked out a Roadrunner. Michel drove the Jeep and listened to Maya talk. Did conversation change when voices were divorced from bodies, planted right in the ears of the listeners by helmet mics? It was as if one was always on the phone, even when sitting next to the person you're talking to. Or was this better or worse? As if you were engaged in telepathy. The cement road was smooth, and he drove at the Roadrunner's top speed of 60 kilometers per hour. He could just feel the rush of thin air against his faceplate. All that CO2 that Sachs so wanted to scrub from the atmosphere. Sax would need powerful scrubbers, even more powerful than the lichens. He needed forests, enormous multi-layered halophilic rainforests, trapping enormous loads of carbon in wood, leaves, mulch, peat. He needed peat bogs 100 meters deep, rainforests 100 meters tall. He had said as much. It marked Anne's face just to hear the sound of his voice. 15 minutes drive, and they came to Nadia's arcade. The site was still under construction and looked raw and messy, like Underhill in the beginning, but on a larger scale. A long mound of burgundy rubble had been excavated from the trench, which ran east and west like Big Man's grave. They stood at one end of the great trench, 30 meters deep, 30 wide, a kilometer long. The south side of the trench was now a wall of glass. The north side of the trench was covered with arrays of filtering mirrors, alternating with wall mesocosms, Mars jars or terrariums, all of them together a colorful mix, like a tapestry of past and future. Most of the terrariums were filled with spruce trees and other flora that made it resemble the great world-wrapping Terran forest of the 60th latitude. Like Nadia Chernyshevsky's old home in Siberia, in other words. Was this a sign that she had a touch of his disease? And could prevail upon her to build a Mediterranean? Nadia was up working on a bulldozer. A woman with her own kind of viriditas. She stopped and came over to talk briefly with them. The project was coming along, she told them calmly. Amazing what one could do with the robot vehicles that were being sent up from Earth. The concourse was done and planted with a variety of trees, including a strain of dwarf sequoia, already 30 meters tall, nearly as tall as the whole arcade. 3 stacked rows of Underhill-style vaulted chambers behind the concourse were installed, their insulation in place. The settlement had just the other day been sealed and heated and pressurized so that it was possible to work inside it without suits. The 3 floors were stacked on each other in even smaller arches, reminding Michel of the Pont du Gard. Of course, all the architecture here was Roman in origin, so that should not be a surprise. The arches were wider, however, and slighter, airier in the tolerance of the G. Nadia went back to work. Such a calm person. Stabile. The very opposite of labile. Low-keyed. Private. Inward. Couldn't be less like her old friend Maya. It was good for Maya to be around her. Opposite end of the scale. Keep her from flying away. Set an example for her. As in this encounter, where Maya was matching Nadia's calm tone. And when Nadia went back to work, Maya retained some of that serenity. I'll miss Underhill when we move out here, she said. Won't you? I don't think so, Michelle said. This will be a lot sunnier. All 3 floors of the new habitat would open onto the tall concourse and have terraced, broad balconies on the sunny side of the rooms. So that even though the whole structure faced north and was buried deeper than Underhill, the heliotropic filtered mirrors on the other side of the trench would pour light onto them from dawn to dusk. I'll be happy to move. We've needed the space from the beginning. But we won't get all this space to ourselves. There will be new people here. Yes, but that will give us space of a different kind. She looked thoughtful. Like John and Frank leaving. Yes, but even that isn't necessarily a bad thing. In a larger society, he told her, the claustrophobic village atmosphere of Underhill would begin to dissipate. This would give a better perspective on certain aspects of things. Michelle hesitated before continuing, unsure how to say it. Subtlety was dangerous when you were using a second language, coming at it from different native tongues. Possibilities for misunderstanding were all too real. You must accept the idea that you perhaps do not want to choose between John and Frank. That, in fact, you can want them both. In the context of the first 100, that can only be scandalous. But in a larger time, or in a larger world, over time, Hiroko keeps 10 men, she exclaimed angrily. Yes, and so do you. So do you. And in a larger world, no one will know or care. He went on reassuring her. Yeah, the Hiroko's harem. Like, why is everybody judging Maya? Hiroko keeps 10 men, she exclaimed angrily. Yes, and so do you. So do you. And in a larger world, no one will know or care. He went on reassuring her, telling her that she was powerful. That, using Frank's terms, she was the alpha female of the troupe. She disagreed and forced more praise from him, until finally she was satiated, and he could suggest they return home. Don't you think it will be a shock to have new people around? Different people? She was driving, and as she turned to ask him this, she almost drove off the road. Women. I suppose. Parties had already landed in Borealis and Acidalia, and the videotapes of them had been a shock. You could see it in people's faces, as if aliens had arrived from space. But so far, only Anne and Simon had met with any of them in person. Running into a rover expedition north of Noctis Labyrinthus. Anne said it felt as if someone had stepped out of the TV. My life feels like that all the time, Maya said sadly. Michel lifted his eyebrows. The Maya program would not have said that. What do you mean? Oh, you know, half the time it seems like one big simulation, don't you think? No. He considered it. I don't. It was all too real, in fact. The cold of it seeping up through the rover's seat, deep into his flesh. Inescapably real, inescapably cold. Perhaps as a Russian, she didn't appreciate that. But it was always, always cold. Even at noon on a midsummer's day, with the sun overhead like an open furnace door blazing in the sand-colored sky, the temperature would be at best 260 K. Or someone told me I don't say degrees with Kelvin. 260 Kelvin, meaning negative 15 degrees Celsius. Cold enough to push through the mesh of a walker and make each move a little diamond pattern of hurt. As they approached Underhill, Michel felt the cold pushing through the fabric into his skin, and he felt the too cool oxygenated air expand out of the mouthpiece deep into his lungs. And he glanced up at the sand horizon and the sand sky and said to himself, I am a diamondback snake, slithering through a red desert of cold stone and dry dust. Someday I will shed my skin like a phoenix in a fire, to become a new creature of the sun, to walk the beach naked and splash in warm salt water. All right, I think I'm gonna stop there. That seems like an excellent place to halt because it says ... Thank you.